Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 405. I am your host, Loren Gray, and welcome to Haarlem, the Netherlands. Yeah, it's funny. They actually had this in our apartment that we're renting, and I thought, what an amazingly cool backdrop that truly tells you where we are right now. We are on our European adventure of a couple of months, and this is our city of choice. Sorry for the clipping in the back, our young dog that's with us. Hard floors. But anyways, so to our topic of discussion today. Um, through all of this process, here he is. As a matter of fact, come here. Wow, there he is. Okay, there. So, topic today. Uh, cute puppies always make a distraction, don't they? Out of discussions with clients on this traveling and communicating and so forth and reviewing performances and so forth, there's an amazing difference between finally getting data correctly reported, your numbers correctly, not the vanity crap, not the implied metrics, not the implied values of metrics and so forth, but literally the correct data, getting that information flow into a functioning platform like the Looker program for Google, or if you have BI intelligence tools and so forth, brings to one key element. So you have performance data. Now what? It is interesting that when you get what you wish for when it comes to accurate data, there comes into question, what exactly do you do with it? How do you organize it? And this is where it kind of goes to a very old conversation in the sense it should be old. It's been a number of years in the making. And for a number of years, I was doing this, speaking on the HSMAS circuit for the Rocket program, the Revenue Optimization, Convergence Education and Training, did in 33 cities. I think you've heard me say this numerous times. We talked extensively of the collaborative combination of marketing strategy and revenue management strategy. And it wasn't just working in parallel and the old terminology of silos and so forth. And it's so fun to see so many platforms now echo what we were saying so many years ago that was new and innovative is now considered the baseline, especially with all the impacts that the COVID lockdown created for us and so forth. And that is that you have to have the usable data in identifiable KPIs between what marketing is doing, what revenue needs, so that it is saying the same things. The best example I used to give was if I was using ROAS as a legitimate marketing metric, return on ad spend, then I could be very successful as a marketer saying, look, I have a 20-to-1 ROAS, I have a 30-to-1 ROAS, 10-to-1 ROAS, whatever it is. Successfully, you gave me $1 and I did 10 or 20x or 30x to the value proposition of the dollar you gave me. The reality of, however, is if I only produced $5,000 from doing this, as good as the ROAS number says, the actual contribution to the true KPI, which is the revenue generation of the channel, was woefully short. And the revenue manager, however happy for me as a marketer that I had a very successful campaign, would look at me and say, that's only $5,000. I need $100,000. That's the real KPI, key performance indicator, is I need this revenue level. I'm noticing more and more with clients, they're very aggressive budgeting expectations this year. I think, as we all know, the realities of how budgets are created, a lot of times they are the boilerplate of conversations with investors. I mean, to talk above the operations of the hotel, you're looking at the ownerships and the management companies' perspectives. One of the reasons they always push, sometimes more often than not, unfortunately, unrealistic budgeting expectations, performance budgets, I should say, and optimization of operational budgets as well, is because they need to show positive numbers to investors, not just the current investors that are looking for the return on why they invested, but also the potential of future growth and future investors for the things that they want to accomplish. A great management company isn't about just the portfolio they're running. They're always in perpetuity looking to advance their portfolio. They want to grow what their expertise is bringing. They have a great team of people that are producing good results. They can accommodate more hotels in order for the company to not remain stagnant to their investors. They are looking to acquire more property opportunities. What gets the attention of people that have the funding to create these property opportunities is to look at your performance as a management company. Your performance as a management company is literally your revenue performance. How well are you optimizing the yieldability of income from the investment portfolio that the management company is operating to solicit you as the person that these people with their property should hire you to handle? and how that compares to other management companies who are trying to do the same thing. If you had management company A and management company B, and management company A shows a perpetual growth and optimization of performance and revenue growth and expansion of the yieldability of the invoices or the inventory that they operate, compared to business B that kind of maintains at the levels. Okay, they're not really growing. They're not, they're hitting their goals, but they're not really margining more. They're not growing more. You're more likely to go with management company A as your choice as an investor for a property that you're building or currently own, to bring them in to be now a part of their portfolio. So that gives you the reason why there's such downward pressure on budget expansions and performance improvements. With this year coming out of the gate as the first, quote, quasi-normal year in comparison to the lockdowns. By the way, spiffy new microphone, green. I got it here, $7, really amazing. It's got a pop screen and everything. Because those days my microphone wasn't working too well on the last couple of shows. So anyway, back to this. So with this year coming out of the, first off, the lockdown impact, then following the lockdown impact is the hesitancy, and then we had the revenge travel. So we had these tsunami demands in summer, we had tsunami demands in winter and so forth. We all looked at this year as being a somewhat normal, as in pre-COVID business cycle year. We knew there was going to be negative impacts to the potential of corporate growth, getting that back. We know that there's some amazing growth of corporate travel again, some realignments as to we'll never go back to people working from home compared to now. Well, no, actually we have. And there's things that we just didn't expect. So there is some sort of, quote, similar impact of business cycles this year to pre-COVID times. Unfortunately, as things often do, they are always compared on year over year and the short-term years. Well, those were all inclusive of the lockdowns. So the artificial growth creations of, we're 300% above where we were last year this time, is artificially created. It's unrealistic because this same time last year was a hybrid time of year. And you've heard us talk on the show many, many times about aggregate average means, where you calculate over a spread of time the contribution impact based on the volume of business of each of those years, and you create an average weighted mean, that is a benchmark. Are we at, above, or below this aggregated benchmark, to give us some sense of performance over a span of time rather than just same period last year, year over year. Statistics is born of the person providing them, and 85% of them are all made up. You always, when presenting to investors and always when presenting to potential partners in growth, your best numbers. You don't show the ugly or the dark. You show the positive and the light. And for that reason, they will take the best numbers that make that conversation. So if you're 287% over the same time last year, if the investor is unaware to temper that number down, then they are very duly impressed that you are doing such remarkable business compared to last year. For that reason, I'll make sure that my camera is still working for what we're doing. For that reason, we need to make sure that the numbers are reflective of a positive growth for potential future investors. And with that in mind, sorry, my camera looked like I said it was off and then it was on. So my train of thought got broken with this. So with investors looking at what we're doing, they are determining whether or not there is a constant growth for your current portfolio. And so you have very aggressive budgets. And we have clients right now that are expressing good numbers compared to year over year, but actually they're very much behind what they forecasted as their growth for this year. They were aggressively high. Why? Because at the beginning of the year, they were pitching their plan for growth for 2023 to not only their current investors, but to their potential future investors. Now, there is always the excuse of 1 month not making budget or falling behind because of XYZ factors or whatever have you. But what's happening, and I'm seeing this more persistently, is every month is falling short of the projected budget goals, even though their year over year numbers are much higher than they were last year, even for the time year over year that is equitably comparable. Some aspects of last year were quite good at this time of year. So showing a comparable growth of 22, 26% growth compared to last year is wonderful. Your ADR may have increased, your occupancy may have increased, whatever your strategy base is. But your budget or to what you had budgeted as growth for this month might be behind 15%, 20%, because you were too aggressive with it. Now, some of the internal logics of these are that, well, I had to disseminate my overall annual growth pattern over a 12-month spread. So even though there were certain months I knew weren't really going to be at the level I projected them to be for budgets, I really felt that that gave me a margin of quote, quote, sandbagging for other months that would exceed what I had planned for on the budget. That way you're not putting, so to speak, all of your eggs in one basket that may better come through for summer business, because that's all my growth pattern on it. And I realistically reduced my first quarter growth because of winter and whatever have you, that these are not months that I can grow effectively from past compared to past years. And I should just expect to make the same number as to what I was doing before. Now, with that, let's see where my microphone is still working and my camera, sorry. With that comes the idea of metrics and numbers, okay? Which is the core, a long story to our core as to having data and now what to do with it. We're now getting, with GA4, remember, July 1st, Universal Analytics goes dark. So if you haven't already been accumulating data with having GA4 configured for your website and for your online campaign tracking and so forth, you're going to have nothing to compare against. You're going to lose your historical data as to historical performances. If you have your own website, you're going to lose all of that data associated with comparative year-over-year performances. You're going to learn, if you don't have it set up for tracking, nothing that you're going to be doing is tracking, which, by the way, as a note of performance, don't just assume the base tracking that Google is providing you, saying, hey, you haven't set up your GA4, so we're going to set it up for you. It's worthless, especially for hospitality. It's just absolutely worthless. If you're not setting up correctly GA4, if you're saying, well, I have everything set up in Universal Analytics, so it'll work in GA4, it doesn't. We've had this discussion on the live show. The metrics and how it is used, session-based versus data layers, data dimensions, is night and day. And so whatever you think you have set up in UA does not translate to GA4. So if you're thinking, oh, it's a transition, it gets handled by Google, and I'll still get my reports, you're going to be in for a very rude awakening when you start looking at July's numbers, because you won't have anything past before it, and nothing's going to match what you had, and your BI is not going to work, and so forth and so on. And that's very critical going to our conversation as to this growth pattern for this year. As I said, as people project forward the larger budgets to entice future investors, to satisfy current investors, the numbers are beginning to show that they overshot persistently. We're now well into the fifth month. We have solidified the actuals for the first quarter. We are showing the pace of the second quarter, with April's numbers being probably finalized in the next few days, mid-month May, typical stuff. And what we're seeing is that some properties are hopefully close to what they projected for the month of April, but most likely, unless there's some amazing variations, which there always are for some markets, that the first quarter was less than what they expected. Some properties for March and spring break had exceptional months, and they hit their mark or beyond. There's always variations to these discussions, but they'll have other months that will be inversion to what I'm talking about, where they may not be what they thought they were. So for that reason, you need hard data that is not arbitrarily interpreted. You need hard data that can be used to validate why things are happening though they're happening, and to tighten up your future forecasting. The data of reporting forensically backwards. This was our traffic last month. This is where it came from last month. This was our production from our ad campaigns last month. This is what our channel contribution was last month. This is our conversion values of last month. Is forensic? You're talking about past tense. It's like describing history. That's great. How are we going to use that data? What are we doing with that data to change our strategy going forward? That's the questions that don't often get asked in the dialogue, because the people that are having to share that data don't want those questions to be asked. They don't want to say, we were wrong, and now the data is telling us what we need to do compared to what we thought we were going to do. Or, hey, we only satisfied ownership told us, when we said we were only going to do these numbers, they said, well, add 7% to it, and that's the budget you have for growth. Make it hit. But we're not going to give you more expenses because we got to keep our operation margin fat to improve to impress our investors. Those don't work. They don't mix together. And that's what is coming back through with these reporting processes. I have a lot of clients that are owners that are like, can you look at what I'm being fed for data? Can you look and tell me why they told me I was going to hit this revenue, but it's this real revenue over here? What is this data that they're giving me showing? And when you audit that data, you begin to realize there was a lot of interpretive numbers put onto it, a lot of implied metrics. Well, if this is how much traffic we have, and this is our anticipated conversion, not actual conversion, then this is our anticipated revenue. Well, that number doesn't match the check I'm cashing into the bank. It's a fictitious number. And now all of a sudden, as we go forward with better and better data collection, we're beginning to realize how smoke and mirrors this is. And it might be your own internal team that made these numbers up, but they might have inherited numbers made up by a team that was existed before them. It might be your third party that used to get away with telling you this stuff. But now, as you get to ask harder and harder questions, or you do an audit with us and we start making you ask them harder and harder questions, you find out that that was a made up number. That was not an actual converting number. That isn't an actual confirmation number with an actual reservation with an actual amount that's supposed to be on. And it was actually calculated to your cancellations. So you purge those out so you can see actually the revenue you're generating from your campaigns that are actually driving it, because you're following the pattern of conversion. If those things aren't set up, then you're only being told assumptive numbers. And everybody, I won't say lies, but everybody will come up with their own answer to preserve their safety. CYA. Because they're the ones that told you that's what's going to happen. The fact that it didn't happen the way they told you it was going to happen means that now they have to come up with a better answer. So real data helps. Now, even with this real data, there's a caveat that it's not your entire contribution. For all of the analytics that are online, that isn't all the sources of your revenue. Simple examples are walk-in revenue, wholesale revenue that doesn't go through the channels that are tracked as metrics on your websites. Your PMS data is your point of truth revenue generation data. Now, there are some ways you can improve your data collection online. Server-side analytics is a great first step. It's a large step. Incurs different costs and so forth, but it gives you a higher accuracy of data or collective data. It's not a percentage of traffic as it is all of traffic. Plus it improves your securities and so forth. But the PMS data is your pure, this is really the money we're making and this is really the bookings we have, because that's the actual machine in your system, that in your tech stack, that tells you that revenue. You have to take all of your sources of data and assess their projected values. Candidly, from somebody that does this, a lot of times you rely on blurring the lines between all these different sources of data so that it can shift and move without creating variances that you have to report. If your group sales that are recorded at the PMS level, even if you don't have Salesforce or things like this that work with this, then you don't have it attributed somewhere else, but the revenue number in your total revenue generation is enough to balance out the fact that other channels underreported their value, their revenue that they should have reported, so that the gross number still stays around where you said it was going to be, but the source of that revenue number is fuzzy. You intentionally do those things so you have wiggle room. And I'm calling that out and saying that you need to not do that. You need to take hard data and speak hard truth about what that data is. You can apply value propositions, you can apply projection values for it and so forth, as long as you simply tell them that these are implied and projected. These numbers. What's the thing in the mirror? Objects may be closer than they appear. These aren't necessarily bedrock truths. We can base it on as much accuracy of historical data as we want. We can base it on as much implied metric value as we want, but the reality of it is we're predicting the future, which means anything can happen to alter that effect, whether it be bad weather, whether it be transportation strikes, it could be a variety of things that augment that number. And so for that reason, the truth of sharing that. Now, management companies will take, even if you were candid with them and told them that doesn't get translated up to the ownership conversations. They don't want to share their uncertainty factors, their confidence factors. In data, you deal with confidence factors. When you have a set of data and you create correlations, there's a confidence factor number that you create from that. This confidence factor is 60%, 70%, 85%, 92%. And we've had this discussion in the live show that when you start getting into the 92 and up percentage, you're almost dealing with a certainty factor, but there's still an uncertainty factor. But it's most likely going to happen. When you're in the 80s, it's trending that it's going to happen. When you're in the 70s, it's like it seems to be going that way, but there's still a huge opportunity for it not to. Okay. Anything below 70%, just discount it as a random correlation, really, honestly, when it comes to counting on the numbers. So management companies tend not to be as candid with ownership groups. They want ownership groups because they write to checks. If an ownership group or owner decides, oh, I'm not going to fund that, it's not funded. Nobody else is going to open up the book and say that. And it's a great way to convince somebody. It's like, well, you're so certain about those numbers. Great. So if it doesn't, we get you to write the check, right? Because you asked me to write the check. And if it doesn't match those numbers, you're going to write the check that makes the difference up, right? And see how quickly that confidence factor goes away. It's really easy to talk about somebody else's money. It's really hard when it's your money. And you have to treat your data under the auspices that it's your money. How much are you willing to write the check for what you say is going to happen? Up into the point of the owner, that whole spectrum below the owner, it's not their money. Yes, management funds what they do. The management firm funds what they do based on the ownership's investment, based on what the owner pays them or allows them to charge for what they're doing. So it comes in or out of their money, but they're still relying on the owner to contribute what they committed to. So I know this is a very elongated conversation about data sourcing as to you have performance data, now what? The now what is how do you translate these numbers into actual anticipation, understanding, and actionable items. So this is what we thought. This is what happened. Why did it happen differently? And it will always happen differently. There is never anybody, and I say that personally as well, that I've hit it down to the penny. Always different. Now, it can be pretty darn close, but it's never exactly what I said it was going to be. And the only time that I could say that you probably hit it exactly is at 11:59 in the evening for that day's business. You could probably say, I predict it's going to be exactly this number, and then click, the clock goes over and there was no more business and you were exactly right. That's just hedging your bets pretty much. So it's always going to be variance. So you always have something to review as to why the variance was created. Why did we fall short? What did we fall short in? What did we say on market segmentation or channel contribution or percentage of conversion that was different than what we thought it was going to be? That key discussion is paramount to what you do for your next evaluation, what you do for your next projection. And you have to create a candid conversation with the management team and with the ownership. Now, this is going to sound really strange to the property people. Oftentimes, this doesn't involve you. There are controllable circumstances from a property perspective, and there are uncontrollable circumstances. The uncontrollable are the things that you don't get to decide on. You would love new furniture in your rooms, but you're not buying it, the owners are. So convincing them of the value proposition of the expense of capital improvement to the return on investment of that capital improvement expense is something you contribute to, but you're not a person that makes that decision. Your requirements of what you have to do from a brand, the signage, the FF&E requirements, and so forth, you would look at and say, I don't need to change my furniture in my room according to the FF&E requirements of the brand this year, but I don't have that control because contractually with the brand, I have to make these improvements to my year. These are things that are out of the realm of your property control. Also, too, when it comes to marketing for your hotel, based upon who actuates the marketing campaign for your hotel and your contribution from the property side, you might just be the recipient of the efforts and a contributor to what is needed to produce those revenues, but you yourself don't control the functionality, the spend, all the performance metrics. Sometimes is moved up to a corporate level for those things to happen. And of course, with the brand relationship, brand and corporate level to make the facilitation happen. You are just the happy recipient of the things that are being done by the people that get paid above you. For those people that are operating their own property and are inclusively the same ones that have to decide what money is going to be spent, there's a freedom and a risk factor to this because you can see what you need to do and make the decisions best suited for you. You may decide that it's not the year to do furniture because your yieldability of your revenue would mean that you would either break even or less and be upside down perhaps in expenses and have to dip into your reserve funding because you're going to spend more than you're actually making. These are intrinsically value propositions of being all in one person, but also the skepticism of whether or not it can be done for you. And unfortunately, a lot of decisions for people made are that they try to mitigate their expenses of service, meaning marketing, as one of their first places to cut monies, in lieu of the hard costs of cash flow requirements of payroll, food costs, leases, and so forth. So you sometimes cut back your ability to generate revenue to maintain operational expense, and you end up creating more of a larger problem than you should from that very problem. You need gas for a car to go. So you can decide not to buy gas, but you have a really pretty car, but it doesn't go anywhere because it's empty. That's the kind of dumb rationale of not spending on marketing dollars. Payroll's payroll, though, right? So with that in mind, you need to understand what you're basing these decisions on. And performance data is one of the key component elements of it. When it comes to online digital marketing for you, it is a component of your overall marketing strategy, but it is not in its entirety the overall representation of everything that you're doing. It is a percentage of all of that, but it is an indicative percentage. What it does usually is reflective of all the other sources of revenue that you're getting to some degree: demand to market, demand to product, cost of acquisition, cost of maintenance. All those things are related to the performance data that you have from online data direct from your performance platforms and channels. So to keep it into a nutshell, the real key element of, so you have performance data, now what? You need to be able to translate the performance data into actual data items. What did we do in comparison to what we planned? Where did it create the variance, and what variance was it? From it, is there something we can do differently? Something we didn't do correctly and need to modify? Something we should have done but didn't do? Or is it what produced and we're fine, but it was something else? These kind of ways of looking and evaluating on a monthly basis is not what I often see in the realm of conversations. Usually it's a finger pointing, not my job, not my responsibility kind of discussion, and it needs to be owned. It needs to be, we are collectively responsible for this, and collectively we failed. Maybe all of you were right and one person was wrong, but we all are wrong because of it. That change in mentality is more important in the dialogue than the fact, the finger pointing and the wasn't my chicken's not my coops kind of thing. So performance data is a great clarifier of that, making sure that the data that you're using is as accurate as it can be, that it records everything rather than implying that it's recording everything, and then it's being put into a format that is understandable in its common KPIs from all the disciplines: marketing, revenue management, operations. All of them need to see the impact as to what the KPI that all of us agree to. Is it a revenue goal? Then it's a revenue goal. Is it an operational margin? It's an operational margin. Whatever it is, it needs to be in those terms so that everyone sees it the same way. So if revenue looks at it and going, hey, I told you the rate, and this was what it was supposed to be for us to hit that revenue goal, and we didn't hit the revenue goal, but not my problem. I told you the rates. Yeah, it is. Just as much as marketing can't say I can't sell that rate, and I put it out there and we got the audience, we got the engagement, we didn't get the conversions. It's revenue not giving me the right rate. Yeah, it is. It's your problem because you should have identified that sooner, created the argument sooner, created the discussion faster, and made whatever changes were necessary so that at the end of the month, you're not looking and saying it's not my problem, it's somebody else's. Meanwhile, I'll still go cash my payroll check. That kind of candid discussion has to enter into performance data. It has to be put into formats that people understand as it's happening. Dynamic data, not static forensic data, not some printed out PDF that gets handed to everybody at the end of the month that people glance at so that they don't get caught by surprise in a meeting that they get thrown into. It has to be dynamic so that people can look at the data, change the dates, change the dynamics of how they're looking at the data, whether it's device-based platform, whether it's source of channel, whether it's conversion of channel, whether it's day cycle, ad campaign performance, whatever it is, they can change the metrics of the report so that they understand what's happening right now to go, wait a minute, this is missing what we said, and it looks like it's this channel's under-reporting on performance, its click-through rate or its conversion rate, whatever way metric you want to start evaluating the performance of, is not what we anticipated. Let me go talk to the team that's running that and see if I can understand why this is different than we anticipated so that I can act on maybe making a change with them that will correct the situation. If at the very least, stopping the bleed of the expense of it, saying it's not producing at the level of ROI that we expected, let's stop it and put the monies to channels that are producing at a level to stave off the loss of revenue, so that we're not looking backwards going, oh, wish we should have done that, wish we should have done that. No, you can actually say, we're looking at it now, and this is what we need to do now. That kind of change in modality of conversation is critical to the usage of performance data now. So there you have it. That was my straight up conversation about performance data. I hope that I didn't ramble too much in circles about some of it, but the importance of its value proposition and its usability are critical to this. For all of you that watch us on our social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, thank you so much for following us. For those who watch us on Twitch, which may be using your media console for that, your Xbox and PlayStation and so forth, please. But most importantly, if you're watching us on TV, on the Hospitality channel, thank you so much. If it's on your Samsung, your Roku, your Apple TV, Google TV, Amazon Prime, just look for the Hospitality channel. The live show is always on the free side of that. And if you are a hospitality marketing professional, want to join a peer group of hospitality marketing professionals, in the sense that it's not about teaching you what digital marketing is, but rather collaborating with peers that are already doing hospitality marketing, you can join us at hospitalitymarketing.club. Put your email in. That's the only thing that's available on the website. I send you a quiz. If you pass the quiz, you can join the peer group. As again, it's not about teaching you the basics. It's about you doing these things and you have advanced questions, and that's the peer group value. It's a closed group. It's not on Facebook. It's our own closed group. And we welcome anybody that is in the industry that wants to join us. Please sign up for us. Obviously, we do a podcast after this, audio podcast. We recap this show, plus actually talk about specific tools related to the techniques of some of the things we talked about. We'll be talking about some of the accurate metric calculation capabilities, and given the time of the times that we're in, the AI functionality of being able to use interpretive values for some of the metrics that come through on the data reporting. So we'll get into some nitty-gritties on that. So thank you so very much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you for the next week's show. We'll be in a different city in the Netherlands next week, so we'll be recording from Amsterdam. So until then, my name is Loren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and look forward to talking to you all next week.